Let me welcome you to this brief session that we're having on rethinking the third third of life. At CREST Leadership, we're hoping in 2024 to develop a full-fledged webinar that will be based on this matter of looking at the third third of life and actually rethinking much of what we presently think about what that third third is to be all about. I want to begin with a macro question, one of the grand questions of life. And one of the grand questions of life is, what is the meaning of life? It's one of those bold, audacious questions that sometimes we have posed to us, and we're not sure how to answer. Many people today, when they're asked who they are, a lot of people will answer not much. When they're asked why they're here, many people, more than we care to admit, would answer that question, why are you here, with the response, I'm not sure. This grand question of what is the meaning of life is something that evades us. And I think it's important as we rethink the third third of life to return to the grand question, the master question. What is the meaning of your life? I was recently doing a little bit of work on a book that I'm completing, and I was trying to find a source, a quote from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. So it led me into a kind of overview of reading through his book, skimming through it, but trying to see if I could find the quote. And at one point in the book, I discovered near the end of the book, when Viktor Frankl, in his later years, was asked to express in one sentence the meaning of his own life. He was asked in a presentation that he was giving by an audience, what is the meaning of your life? And so he said, I'll write down my response on a piece of paper, and I want to ask you to guess what you think the meaning of my life is. After some moments of quiet reflection, there was a student who surprised Frankl by saying the following: the meaning of your life is to help others find the meaning of theirs. That was it exactly, Frankl said. Those are the very words that I had written. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning is recording his experience in the Holocaust and Auschwitz, and the development of what he called logotherapy, which simply is meaning therapy. He really sees the great problems of our current world as tied to a lack of meaning, that addictions and aggression and the sense of despair that is often present in the lives of people really goes to the issue of meaning. So he answered it. The meaning of his life is to bring meaning and help others find meaning in theirs. And Viktor Frankl lives that out and lived that out. Another story that I came across was a story by about Alexandros Papadakis. He was involved post-World War II with an effort to try to mend relationships or to reconstruct a positive relationship with Germany. He lived in Crete, and he was a man who, in his later life, was asked by Robert Fulghum. Robert Fulghum, I think, wrote that book, Everything I Learned About Life I Learned in Kindergarten. Fulghum one day had an opportunity to interview Alexandros Papadakis. And he was inspired by him when he said, ask me any question. And Fulghum thought for a moment, and then it struck him as reasonable to ask Dr. Papadakis, what is the meaning of life? Papadakis didn't really laugh at as many others would, considering that question is one of those seemingly unanswerable questions. But Papadakis knew the answer. After scanning Fulghum's face for assurance the question was in earnest, he fished out of his wallet and produced a small little piece of mirror that he kept in his wallet. And he quietly explained its significance. He said, when I was a small child during the war, we were very poor. We lived in a remote mountain village, and one day on the road, I found a broken pieces of mirror. A German motorcycle had been wrecked in that place. I tried to find all the pieces of the mirror and put them together, but it was impossible. So I kept only the largest piece. I began to play with it as a boy, as a toy, and I became fascinated by the fact that I could reflect light with that mirror into dark places where the sun would never shine, in deep holes and crevices. and dark closets and behind walls. It became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible places I could find. As I became a man, I grew to understand that this was not just child's play, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light. I'm not the source of light, but light, the light of truth, the light of understanding, the light of knowledge is there, and that light will only shine in many dark places if I reflect it. I am a fragment of a mirror, he said, whose whole design and shape I do not know. Nevertheless, with what I have, I can reflect light into the dark places of this world, into the dreary places in the hearts of men, and change some things in some people. Perhaps others may see and do likewise. That is what I'm about. That is the meaning of my life. Now, here are two men who, in the later years of their life, well into their third, are in touch with the macro master question, the grand question of life: what is the meaning of my life? As we wrestle with rethinking the third, it would be my challenge, it would be our challenge to encourage you to refresh your sense of who you are and why you're here. The whole matter of how we view the life stages that we live on this earth is intriguing. We have standard default kind of ideas that our early life is a life of education, our middle life is a life of work, and then our later life is a life of retirement. Someone has said we're like a meal. When we're young, it's like the meat is raw. It's on the barbecue, it's raw. But then in the middle part of our life, we cook the meat and we sort of prepare the meal. And then by the time we're old, the meat on the grill is burnt. Or someone has said, early life is the appetizer, the middle life is the entree, and the later part of life is the dessert. Or it's a mountain climb. We climb the mountain in our early years, we summit in our mid years, and then we descend in our later years. It's as if we viewed this kind of life stage matter as a linear conveyor belt, eventually off of a cliff. And we've forgotten that wisdom of Moses. Moses said, Lord, teach us to number our days so that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. It's not Moses saying, God, help me count my days. I believe Moses is saying, Lord, help me to make my days count to the end of my days so that I can present to you, in the end, a heart of wisdom, which means we are to keep on living. We live in different ways in the third than we do in the second third. And this matter of discussing together and having a conversation about this issue of rethinking the third of life is something that we want to now just have you think about, engage in, and for your own purposes to think about what it is that for you represents the meaning of your life. Recently, or just a few years ago, I engaged in a personal project of asking myself, what is the next decade about? It's a question I would encourage you to think about. Whatever that number might be. It may be, I'm 65. What's the next 65 to 75 about? What if you're 68 to 78, or if you're 70, what is 70 to 80 about? And to realize that while you're still breathing and while your heart is still beating, you are still God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do the good work that needs doing. Your later years are not years of pause and quit and stop. They're years of carrying on, but carrying on in a different way. It is going from what Arthur C. Brooks refers to, it is going from strength to strength. It's going from one version of strength to a different version of strength. In our early years and our mid years, we have strength in different domains. We particularly have physical strength. We've got a greater sense of endurance physically. We may have a different emotional strength or intellectual strength. In our later years, we have different strength. And that strength becomes the very thing that makes us relatable. Arthur C. Brooks, by the way, in his book, From Strength to Strength, asks the question, who is the most successful entrepreneur in the world, in world history? And his response is he believes that Paul the Apostle. What was his secret? And surprisingly, he says his secret was that as Paul aged, as he got to the final lapse of his life, he became more relatable. Why? Because he became more honest, more humble. He became more aware of the fact that there were thorns. There were things in his flesh that hindered him, but he endured. He said, I press on for the upward call. I keep going. I don't stop. I live out my meaning. I live out my purpose. So we want to encourage you to be thinking about and rethinking your third. And particularly, wrestle perhaps again with the master question. What is the meaning of my life? What is it that God would have me in the next decade or in the decades that I still have to live be about? To be able to answer that question if you're asked, what is the meaning of your life? So let's engage the conversation. Let's engage our process of what your thoughts are on this very, very important question of how we live in such a way that we make our days count so that in the end we can present God a heart of wisdom.